Hello, amazing humans. Welcome back to part 2 of your directions for the packet. So once you have finished everything up to the big picture, you're going to move on to the next slide. Oops. Literary analysis. We're going to look at the plot. Think about the story and the way that it's written, and then answer this question in the space provided. What makes a story different from other forms of writing? How is a story different from a newspaper story, a recipe, a math test, or a blog post? What do you think? So what makes a story, a fiction, different from a newspaper article or a recipe? Put your answer here. Oops. The Greek philosopher Aristotle noted that drama contains a beginning, a middle, and an end. Throughout the ages, writers have debated and discussed what makes a novel a novel. Then, about 150 years ago, novelist Gustave Freytag created a diagram of a plot. That diagram divided the plot into 5 parts. Since then, the diagram has evolved and changed. The directions for the next slide is that you're going to use the plot pyramid on the next slide to record the events of the plot for the monkey's paw. You will need to go back into your story to do this, or into your notes. We begin with the exposition. Go back and look at the definition of what exposition means, if you need to. Next is the rising action. Again, go back to your notes where you have the definitions of all of these literary techniques. Next is the climax, then the falling action, and finally the resolution. When you're finished with that, you're going to move on to literary analysis skills, point of view. So you're probably familiar with the 3 different points of view found in literature. First person, told by the narrator. The author will use the first person pronoun I to show who is telling the story. An example of this would be Twilight, or The Hunger Games, or The Fault in Our Stars. Second person, told by an outside observer who's also part of the story. It's unusual for a story to be told in the second person point of view. A choose your own ending book is a good example of second person, where the narrator speaks directly to the reader. If you've never read a choose your own ending book, something else that looks like second person are directions. First, you are going to crack the egg, then you are going to beat the egg, then you're going to make the omelet. Directions, or like a recipe. Third person point of view is told by an outside observer who is reporting the story. The third person point of view can be further divided. So if the narrator has an all-seeing and all-knowing point of view, it's called omniscient narrator, which means they can get into everybody's mind. They can see everything that's happening. So you can skip from the protagonist to the antagonist to the side characters. A third person limited point of view means that it restricts what the reader knows about what's going on in all areas of the story. So the narrator may only share what 1 or 2 characters know, experience, see, or feel. So if you're only in 1 or 2 characters' heads, you can only see what they see. That's limited. Right? What point of view is the story written in? Is it first person, second person, third person? If it's in third person, is it limited or omniscient? Complete the chart on the next slide to provide evidence from the story that supports your answer. You can summarize the evidence, but include at least 1 direct quote from the story. An example has been done for you. So on this next page, you're going to find a quote and put it in this column. And then you're going to explain in this column why it shows point of view. So the example they give you is, Mr. White looked up sharply just in time to intercept a knowing glance between mother and son. The words died away on his lips, and he hid in a guilty grin his thin gray beard. This shows the father sees the mother and son looking at each. The reader sees the action through the father's point of view. Okay, so this is the explanation. This is the direct quote. And notice that you need to have quotation marks around your quote. The next task is to understand the characters. Readers can understand a story in a deeper way when they analyze characters and their relationships to each other. There's a graphic organizer on the next slide that will help you dig deeper into the characters of this story. What qualities do the characters exhibit? Qualities such as responsibility, kindness, or intelligence. How do their words and actions show the reader what kind of person they are? We have Mr. White, Mrs. White, and Herbert White, and Sergeant Major Morris has been done for you. So these are things that show us what kind of person Sergeant Major Morris is. And if you remember, this is indirect characterization. So he warns them he's not responsible for what happens. He sells Mr. White the paw, knowing its power, and he seems to enjoy being the center of attention. What does this tell you about Sergeant Major Morris? What have you learned about each character now that you have analyzed their words and actions? This is where you write what you think everything you wrote on the last slide means about each of these characters. We have foreshadowing. I know you love foreshadowing. So foreshadowing is a writing technique in which the writer weaves hints into a story that prepare the reader for events to come. We know this. We've done this a lot. When it is well incorporated into the story, the reader may not even be aware of it until after the completion of the story. So it's very easy to see foreshadowing after you've read a story and go back to find foreshadowing. In The Monkey's Paw, the author uses foreshadowing. Sergeant Major Morris tells the Whites about the man's wishes who had the monkey's paw before him. He states, "I don't know what the first two were, but the third was for death." And here's the page number where you can find that quote. His statement hints at the power of the wishes. Certainly, the first two wishes must have had terrible results if the man used his last wish for death. But the Whites don't seem to be concerned with this fact that clearly shows the deadly power of the magical paw. Your task is to go back into the text and locate examples of foreshadowing. Explain what the foreshadowing is, what the foreshadowing is implying, or how the author is using it. You may summarize the example, but you must have one direct quote. Include the page number where you found your example. So here will be your direct quote of foreshadowing, example of foreshadowing with quotation marks. Explain how it's used or what it's foreshadowing, and then here's the page number. All right? And our final analysis is fate. Sergeant Major Morris tells the Whites that the holy man put a spell on the monkey's paw to teach people that fate ruled their lives, and there are consequences with trying to change fate. What is fate? The Greeks and Romans believed that there were three sisters called the Fates who ruled a person's life. The Fates are often shown as weavers. One sister spins the thread of life, one determines how long it will be, and one cuts the thread, which ends the life. When we refer to something happening because of fate, we mean it's out of our control. When people say things were meant to be, they are referring to fated events. Question 1, how does fate seem to control the events in the monkey's paw? And question 2, why is it difficult in the story to determine if the events are fate or if they are coincidental? Cosmic irony. The term irony is used to describe the difference between what is expected and what actually occurs. There are 6 types of irony: verbal, situational, dramatic, cosmic, historical, and Socratic. We have talked about verbal, situational, and dramatic. So this is about cosmic irony. One of the easiest types of irony to understand is verbal irony. We usually call it sarcasm, but we all know the difference between sarcasm, right? Sarcasm is meant to be mean, where verbal irony is not. Think about the phrase nice hair. Literally, the phrase is a compliment. Your hair is nice or looks nice. But if it's said in a particular way, it's usually an insult, which is sarcasm. The meaning of the words used the meaning of the words used is actually the opposite of what the speaker intends them to mean. So that's sarcasm. If you're talking about verbal irony, you're going for a picnic and it starts to rain and you say, "Well, this is perfect weather for a picnic." In this story, The Monkey's Paw, the writer uses cosmic irony. Cosmic irony refers to an outside force, fate, the universe, the gods, that manipulates events that result in an unexpected way. So your third question is, what is the unexpected cosmic irony of The Monkey's Paw? And in our next set of directions number 3, we're going to talk about an essay. Woo! All right, that's Mrs. DeLong, over and out.